And get a little sip of water and we'll get going. Alrighty then, so it was a unique year. We had 5 Sundays in the month of January, and for the first 4 we went back to the basics. We went back and we reviewed the fundamentals of the teachings that Ernest Holmes called Science of Mind. And if we try to just kind of sum up, the essence of that teaching, is very simple. It's very simple to explain. It may not be that simple to live or that simple to really embody, because it kind of requires us to break through a lot of ideas that we have absorbed from the human race. And the first is that the universe that we live in is a spiritual system, not a material system. Now, you'll hear me say this, that probably the fundamental question that any of us needs to ask and to answer, and to satisfy ourselves with the answer, to make sure that we're truly comfortable with our answer, is: did matter create consciousness, or did consciousness create matter? You see, I think that is the crux of the whole debate between materialism, the materialist thinking, and spirituality, or the spiritual thinking. So in the terms from materialism, if you read the materialist philosophers, and what has happened is that somehow the dust of the earth has formed itself into living organisms, and as those living organisms evolved, they evolved consciousness. They developed consciousness. And in that way of thinking, consciousness is a function of the brain. That is, the brain is the center of consciousness, and it creates consciousness. There was we were watching a discussion. Quantum physicist Henry Stapp, S-T-A-P-P, you'll find him on YouTube. And he was making a presentation before the United Nations on the relationship of consciousness and the brain. And I believe it was in that presentation that I became aware that in some conference, the community of scientists that were present wanted to define consciousness as a function of the brain. And other scientists pushed back and said, you really don't have enough scientific evidence to make that claim. You don't know. And the point is that we don't know. Scientifically, we don't know. There's this thing called consciousness. But does the brain cause consciousness, or does consciousness create the brain as an organ to use? So in the spiritual realm, we get the teaching that in the beginning was God, whatever the concept of God is. If you look at the creation myths of different cultures, and by myth I don't mean a lie or a falsehood, I mean the definition of myth as being a story that holds our deep values. The mythology speaks to us, as Joseph Campbell says, it's the metaphor. The myth is the metaphor. But in religious teachings, everything starts with the divine. And then the divine somehow, by an act of will or volition, creates. In the Western culture that comes to us from the book of Genesis, we are told that God said, "Let there be," and there was. So we live in a spiritual universe, is the first thing. And the activity of spirit is thought. Frederick Bales tells us to consider that thought is the only form of energy that we know that does not have a mechanical origin. Electricity is generated down at the steam plant or the nuclear plant. But thought does not have a mechanical origin. So the activity of spirit is thought. We live in a spiritual universe. and something acts upon that thought. And that something is what we teach, we call the law of mind. Other teachings might say it's the doer of the word, right? God speaks its word, and the doer of the word acts upon it. But the activity of this power that acts upon the intention then does whatever needs to be done to bring into existence the perfect outpicturing of its thought. We say the divine wishes to have a certain experience. The law acts upon that declaration, that wish, that command, if you want to call it that, and brings it into fruition. So in terms of the book of Genesis, we're told that God said, let there be stars and planets and moons and plants and animals and lands and oceans and people. And we're all here. The declaration is the involution, and then the unfoldment, the acting of the law upon the word, and doing whatever it needs to do to bring the invisible stuff and substance of the universe together into the appropriate form, so that as spirit enjoys the form, it experiences what it wished to experience. But this power does whatever needs to be done. So the second example then is the example of consciousness created matter. A conscious act of the Creator set into motion whatever needed to be done. Physicists might say that which kicked the can that started the Big Bang. Right? So physicists talk about the Big Bang, and you say, what happened before the Big Bang? So well, we won't know. We don't have a way of knowing what kicked the can. Because whatever happened before the Big Bang, whatever happened the instant before the Big Bang, is unknowable to science, because it cannot be weighed, measured, observed by our typical scientific methods. They're not useful in that situation. So we live in a mental universe, a spiritual universe, and as I say, if you want to ponder a deep question, the deepest question I think you can ponder is, did matter create consciousness, or did consciousness create matter? And what we teach is that consciousness created matter. We live in a mental spiritual universe. There is a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. And I think it's very important we understand what the belief is. It's not just an intellectual agreement. Oh yes, of course, I believe that. Yes, no, it's more than that. Right? We're told it says you think and believe in your heart, and the heart typically represents what we would call the subconscious mind. And actually, it's not really unconscious. It's just below our threshold of awareness. And I don't know if those of you who lived through the 70s, if you remember the scandals in the media. There was books written by, I remember studying in high school, about subliminal advertising. About how in the movie theater they put these secret messages in the movies, as eat more popcorn, drink more Coke, or something like that. And the sales at the concession stands went up. Excuse me, when these particular movies were showing. And the idea there is that there is a level of awareness in the human consciousness that it is aware and it acts, but our conscious mind is not aware of what it's doing. It's almost like we have a split personality. One part of us is doing something, the other part really doesn't know anything about it. If you've taken any self-help psychology seminars, they always use the example of the iceberg. The conscious mind is the part of the iceberg that floats above the water, but the unconscious mind, well, excuse me, that's the 90% of the iceberg that's submerged that you can't see. So we live in a spiritual universe. The activity of spirit is thought. And there is a power that responds to that thought to create the circumstances in our lives exactly according to our belief. but the belief may not be a conscious belief. It may be a subconscious belief. So if we take that as our premise, or the first 4 weeks in January, we take that as our premise, that is the foundation of the teaching of the science of mind. And Ernest Holmes, very, very plainly in his teaching, says if that's not so, then you're wasting your time studying. If that's not true. So the primary objective of being a student would be to test this, to conduct your own experiments as a scientist might, and to test it and say, well, how would I know? How would I know that that's true? How would I know that I know? One of the things that I learned when I was being trained in root cause analysis is to ask level why 5 times, to really ask ourselves, well, how do I know what I know? So if you have a problem in the field with a product that you shipped, you need to really understand at a deep level what the cause of that problem was. And you may need to do something on the surface level to immediately deal with the problem and fix it, to put a Band-Aid on it. But to really make a lasting change, you have to ask yourself, why 5 times? Why did this get to the field? Why did it escape our quality control testing? And then why did it happen in the first place, all the way down the line? What I came to realize is that in our culture, we function at a very shallow level. We typically function at the first or second level of why. In other words, we, in our society, we really don't know why we know, or what we know, or how do we know what we know. We have lots of opinions. You can turn on the radio and you can listen to people give their opinions for 3 or 4 hours a day on different topics, politics, sports, different topics. How can anybody have enough opinion to talk for 3 or 4 hours every day of the week, 5 days a week? But they do. But opinion doesn't require much knowing. It doesn't require much proving. So what I'm getting at is, it's done unto us according to our belief. And that belief can be a combination of what we know consciously and what we know subconsciously. But how much do we know what we know? How aware are we really of what we believe? How do I know what I believe at a subconscious level, you see? Now here's the importance of it. Life is done unto us according to our belief. We live in a spiritual universe. The activity of spirit is thought. There's a power that responds to the thought exactly according to our belief. And if we don't know what we believe, if we are kind of not in command of that, or not in control of that, then what happens is everything that we get in our life seems kind of random. Everything that we get in our life seems kind of ordinary, if you will, in terms of it fits into the race consciousness. It fits into the consciousness of the human race, what human beings believe. So if we're not paying attention to what we're paying attention to, we tend to conform, we tend to blend in to race consciousness, which we absorb by listening to people around us, the media, the news, those kind of things. And also at the subconscious level, what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious, the collective subconscious. We're all one, we're all connected. So if the statistics tell us that it's cold and flu season and 30% of the population is going to catch the cold and flu, if we haven't done anything to, as Dr. Holmes would call it, insulate, isolate, and inoculate ourselves from that race consciousness, then we will have statistically that experience. So it's very important for us then, because the last 4 weeks we talked about techniques for practice on how we can go about changing our thoughts, changing our thinking, changing our lives. And it's very important for us as we come into this week. What I really want to focus on is the practice of that. How do we practice that? It's one thing to know about it, read about it, talk about it, but how do we put it to use in our lives? How do we practice And what we have to consider is that our very lives are our practice. It's not just a matter of sitting down for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening and doing our spiritual practice, whether it be reading or meditation or spiritual mind treatment, and then spending the rest of the 23 hours and 20 minutes of the day functioning at the level of race consciousness. Our lives are our practice every minute that we're awake and even while we're asleep. So it is unique, I think, to human beings. There may be other sentient beings that can do this, but we as human beings, we seem to have multiple streams of thought going in consciousness, whatever consciousness is. We have multiple streams of thought going at the same time, or we can. And let me kind of put it to you this way: when we are asleep, and the activity that we refer to as dreaming, when it begins, and thoughts are occurring, and we identify with those thoughts. We think, this is me. This is me. I am whatever's going on here. This is a real situation in my life, and I react and I respond according to that. And we're not aware that it's a dream. We believe it's reality. We're not aware that it's simply a creation of consciousness. It is a little drama, a little story that something somewhere is making up, and we've been swept up in it. We've been caught up in it. So if in the dream there are happy circumstances occurring, we're happy, we feel happy. If there are sad circumstances occurring, we feel sad. If there's something really big and mean chasing us, we run, right? We're scared and we run. And we usually don't stop and think, hey, this is just a dream. This is only a dream. We believe it is real. We believe it is real. In our waking lives, we also get entangled with a stream of thought and a stream of consciousness, and we believe that we are those thoughts. So if a sad thought is occurring, we say, I'm sad. I feel sad. Why are you sad? I had a sad thought. If a happy thought occurs, we think, well, I am happy. If a frightening thought occurs, we feel frightened. And when we learn to meditate, we learn that there's a different level of consciousness that we can identify with. We can become the witness of those thoughts. We can witness those. So instead of saying, I am sad, what the witness says is, oh look, a sad thought is arising. A sad thought is arising. Oh look, there goes a sad thought. A happy thought is arising. There goes a happy thought. We can even start to ask ourselves, for whom did that thought arise? Who is the one observing the thought? And we start to understand, this is what meditation practices teach us, is to become the witness, or to become the observer of the thoughts, and not to get entangled with them, not to identify with them, not to think I am the one that's sad, or I am the one that's mad, or I am the one that is happy. But to take one step back and say, I am the one observing the sadness, I am the one observing the happiness, I am the one observing the anger. We have that ability as human beings to do that. In fact, we have the ability, I've mentioned it before, but just in case someone didn't get it, there's a website called the Internet Archive. That's where our old audio talks are, by the way, up on the Internet Archive. If you just search for Reverend Jim Young, they'll pop up. But there's a book there that you can download, and it's called the Tibetan Yoga of Dreams and Sleep. And it's written by a Tibetan Buddhist monk. Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And it talks about a spiritual practice that the Tibetans teach, which teaches us how to become aware in our dreams that it is a dream. It's not real. It's just a dream, you know. How many nights we woke up frightened and it was just a dream. Just a dream. And the purpose, one of the purposes of that spiritual practice is that if we can become aware while we are dreaming, if we can become aware that it is only a dream and we are the ones witnessing the dream, first of all, we detach from it. So we don't have to become frightened if the character in the dream is frightened. We don't have to become sad if the character in the dream is sad. You know, you ever stop to consider that you have created all of those characters in your dream? You are actually all of them at the same time, and yet there's one that you identify with, and you say, well, that's me, and that's somebody else or something else. It's all a delusion. It's all a delusion of your mind, of your consciousness. So what happens is we can learn in our sleep to recognize that what we are seeing and what we are experiencing is not real. It is only a play of consciousness that is playing out in the field of sleep. And then what we can do is we can become very, very brave spiritual beings. Because then we can say, this is an opportunity for me to act as the spiritual being I believe myself to be. If I don't like what's playing out, I can change it. Or I can react and respond to what's playing out according to what I know to be true spiritually. So if in our dreams someone wants to take something for us, we can realize no one can take anything from me. There's no one to take anything from me. There is only one life. And if someone tried to take from me, they would be taking from themselves. No one can take anything that I am not willing to give up. And we can talk to ourselves in our sleep that way, and we can change the outcome of the dream. It's very interesting and I believe a very important spiritual practice, albeit not necessarily easy to do, but important. So can you imagine then that we go from this experience that we identify with as sleep and dreams, that we spend most of our nights asleep, a third of our life asleep, and we believe we are whatever the dream is. We are engaged in it, we are entangled with it. We are convinced that it is real. Even though we're doing things that you cannot do, fly without an airplane, talk underwater, do different things that we can do. But then what happens is the clock goes off when we wake up, and then we say, oh, well, that was a dream, but this is real. And what I'm asking you to consider is that this is not real. This is a different level of the dream. This is a different level of consciousness. And within this level of consciousness, just as the Tibetans tell us that you can learn how to become lucid in the dreams while your body is asleep, and you can learn to observe them, and you can learn to think differently. In the waking, what we call the waking state, we can also learn to awaken an observer, a part of us that recognizes that what we are seeing and what we are experiencing is the outpicturing of consciousness acted upon by the law of mind. And in many cases, what we are seeing is not real. It is not real with regards to it does not have the power to sustain itself. It is simply a projection. go to the movie theater and they put the picture up on the screen, you can become entangled in the story, and you can become entangled in the cinematography. And it can seem real. But it's only there as long as the projector is running. And if we think about what we see and experience in the world about us, it is only there as long as there is consciousness to believe in it, to sustain it. When the belief changes, the experience changes. So the title of today's talk is, what we see, we become. What we see, we become. And the reason for that is of all of the things that are occurring in this world, everything that is going on at the same time, we only select a very small slice of it that we recognize, that we see. There was an experiment one time, I think it might have been on one of Oprah's shows or something like that, but what they did was they arranged for an actor to come out on stage to pretty much just run up on stage and to grab somebody's purse and to run off stage. They staged a purse snatching during the middle of the show. And then they stopped and they asked the people in the studio audience, there were several hundred of them, they asked them to describe the person who came up and stole that purse and ran away. And the descriptions of this person varied so much that if you looked at it, you would think, did they all see the same person? And of course, the person looked different to me as well. But some thought it was tall, some thought the person was short, some thought the person was male or female or black or white, wearing a coat, not wearing a coat, all of these different things. And what's happening is people are seeing, what they're doing is they are selecting bits and pieces of what they see, and then they're interpreting that, and they're interpreting that according to their consciousness. In other words, we are projecting out into the world. What we are seeing out in the world is a reflection of what we're expecting to see, what our consciousness believes in. So this is very important. If we agree with the opening premise that we live in a spiritual universe, the activity is thought, there's a power that responds to thought, then obviously what we want to do is we want to say, well, how do I know what I'm thinking? How do I change what I'm thinking? And you know what you're thinking by what you're seeing, by what you're paying attention to, by what you're giving your energy to. And in order to change that, all you have to do is not think about that which is not real, not think about that which you don't want to experience. But turn your mind away from the limiting ideas, the false ideas, the unreal ideas, and turn your attention back to God. In the Upanishads it says something, I have to paraphrase because I can't remember the quote specifically, but it says something like, you can't see me with your two physical eyes. This is God speaking. You can't see me with your two physical eyes, but I've given you a third eye, a divine eye, by which you can see me. And of course, you know from if you've studied any of the Eastern philosophy, the third eye is kind of in the middle of the forehead, right between the other two eyes and slightly above. It's a chakra that we sometimes engage in meditation. In the New Testament theology, it's said a little differently. Jesus said, "Let him who has eyes see. Let he who has ears hear." And what he was telling the people is, you can't see this in the normal way. You have to discern it in the spiritual way. And we're told God is spirit, and you have to know God in spirit. It's not just the words. It's not just the words that you will hear. But there's a deeper meaning, an esoteric meaning that you kind of hear with your inner hearing, with your soul. So what we want to consider then is that our lives and our daily life is our practice. And if we can simply become the witness of what we're seeing, to see that this person is seeing this. I step back, and instead of saying, I see this, I see that, and becoming engaged with everything that we think we see, we can come back and we become the observer, like we do in meditation. And we can say there is seeing occurring. There's observing occurring. But what is this person observing? What are they giving their attention to? And this is difficult, because most of the time we don't want to do it, because it reveals to us a lot of things that we would rather not believe about ourselves. We all like to think of ourselves as advanced, enlightened spiritual beings. But when we come right down to it and say, well, what are you talking about? What are you paying attention to? What is your conversation about during the day? What is it that you see? We tend to find something a little bit less than our expectations, which is normal. It's just a normal part of human life. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It means that we're growing people. Part of us knows much better. Part of us isn't quite ready to live up to what we know. By reflecting on what we're paying attention to, by what we're seeing, we get the feedback we need to grow. So I think you can see that if, if what we're seeing is a reflection of our own consciousness, right? It's a mirror, and we're looking into a mirror out there, then what we're seeing is what we truly believe. And if it's done unto us according to our belief, then we're going to get more of that into our lives. What we see is what we become. It's very simple to explain. So now here's some examples then of how this might work. And of course, the news is probably one of our greatest opportunities for growth. So the news will come on and tell us pretty much everything really out of the ordinary that happened today, and try to focus for us on the scandals and the controversy and all those kind of things. And we can get caught up in that, and we need to do something about that. And all of these other things, and of course that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to engage us like that. And we get ourselves caught up in it. But if we are witnessing that, we can say, whoa, what is it that part of my consciousness is getting entangled with? What does it have to believe to be true in order to get upset about that? In order to get angry about that? In order to want to struggle with that? Remember, whatever we fight, we stay attached to. Right? Somewhere along the line I read that you can't send anyone to prison unless somebody's willing to go sit there and watch them. So you have to send 2 people to prison, at least. So if we want to become engaged with and entangled with and to struggle with all of the things that the world of the senses kind of brings to our attention, we have to recognize that we're making a choice, albeit an unconscious choice, but a choice to stay entangled. And staying entangled is not going to help us grow. Joel Goldsmith asks us to consider that the hope for the human race does not lie in our human nature. It lies in our spiritual nature. Because in our human nature we will continue to stay entangled in the same problems that we've been entangled in since history began. And since before, but nobody wrote it down that we know of. Emmett Fox asks us to consider that we can read the Old Testament and we can understand what Pharaoh was doing 4,000 years ago, because consciousness has not advanced very much in the last 4,000 years. we understand the mindset of Pharaoh. Because there's part of us that has that mindset. Part of us that observes that mindset around us. So if we find ourselves becoming engaged with the ways of the world and the issues of the world and the entanglements of the world, that is an opportunity for us to step back and to take a deep breath and to say that everything that I am seeing is merely a projection in consciousness of the human race. And the hope for the human race is that change in consciousness that occurs, that we recognize as spiritual growth. So today I take my mind off of the drama of the world and I turn my attention entirely on God. So if the report is about sickness and disease, and I find myself becoming attached to that, I remind myself that God is perfect health. The divine has never been sick a day in its life. That what we are seeing is nothing more than an outpicturing of consciousness. And the entire situation can and will change as soon as the consciousness changes, as surely as the movie on the screen changes when we change the film in the projector. So we don't waste time getting caught up into the entanglement, into the entrapment that we are invited to on a daily basis. Baiting, if you will, debate baiting, or the things that you see on Facebook that says why this, click here if you don't like it, why that, click here if you don't like it. Very superficial level of thought. Nobody asks why 5 times before clicking. Yeah, we ought to do something about that. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to click the like button. Because it does nothing. It does nothing. So what we want to do then is we want to become aware of what it is that we see. We want to change what it is that we see by taking our mind off of the things that we don't want, off of the world around us. And we want to turn our mind entirely to God. Augustine said, I ask nothing of thee, not even thy love. I only want thee. And I think that's the mystic viewpoint, saying, I only want thee. Everything that we see around us is working itself out according to the level of consciousness that prevails, and that consciousness is in fact evolving. It is in fact changing. Everything that we see that we may have been caught up in that we don't like is in the process of changing anyway. We turn our mind entirely towards God, and when we disengage from whatever that level of consciousness is that created the problem, we are in fact participating in a solution. And the solution that we are participating in is at a deeper level, level 5 levels wide. We are participating at a level of cause and not in a level of effect. So what I invite us to do this week, as we go forward this week, is to take time in the morning to practice being the observer. Take time when you do your spiritual practice in the morning, whether it's for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, whatever you can do, but just take time to become the observer of your thoughts. Right? And the easiest way to do that is just simply a 5-count meditation. You breathe in and you count 1, and you exhale, you breathe in and you count 2 and you exhale. And you go up to 5 and then you go back to 1. And you just do that without losing your count. And if a thought comes up, if you start to think about what you have to do when you go to work, you just simply say, oh look, there goes the thought. Oh look, there goes the thought. If you lose your count, you just gently nudge yourself back. Right? You're just gently bringing yourself back. As the shepherd gently brings the little lamb that strays from the herd, from the flock. He takes his little stick with the hook in it and just kind of gently brings that little one back. Gently bring your mind back. So learn in the morning, practice in the morning to become the observer of your thoughts. As you go through the day, try to continue that practice. Try to pay attention to what your conscious mind is paying attention to. And if it starts to get caught up in the drama of the world, the illusions of the world, remind yourself right there and then, this is not true. This is not real. This is not permanent. This is all changing. This is all fading to dust. And turn your mind back to the divine, to that which is eternal, to that which knows nothing of the drama that is playing out before your eyes. Just try it for a week. Just try for a week, keeping your mind on nothing more than the love and the presence, the generosity, the abundance of God. If your mind gets caught up in lack, turn it to abundance. If your mind gets caught up in fear, turn it to love. If your mind gets caught up in drama, just turn it back to God. Be in the world, but not of the world. Life is your spiritual practice. You are here for that purpose, to grow the soul, which means to grow in your realization of the presence of God. You can't grow in your realization of the presence of God when you leave your thoughts entangled with the creations of human consciousness. Take a mental retreat, a time away from, step back from. Bring your mind to God. Bring your inner mind, your third eye, your intuitive mind, your mystical mind. Bring it into the realization of God. Now, the world around you will change, but your purpose is not to change the world. Your purpose is simply to know God. But the world around you will change because what you see, you become. Thomas Troward, I mentioned him last month. Thomas Troward was a very influential teacher in the life of Dr. Holmes. Written several books. Actually, they were transcribed from lectures that he gave. They're in public domain now. They're available on the internet as well. The first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook were based on Thomas Troward's work, The Creative Process in the Individual, which is available, pretty sure, in PDF format to download. Thomas Troward's son was drafted during the First World War. Troward was British, and his son was drafted, and he went to visit his father before he shipped over to the front. And his father gave him a letter to take with him. And that letter is reproduced in a biography of Thomas Troward, in one of his books, or one of the books about him. And it has always struck me as kind of the essence of what we teach, even under the greatest of difficulties, the greatest of atrocities, warfare, and all that entails. And what Troward advised his son in the letter is try to see a little bit more of God every day. Try to see a little bit more of God every day. Now, we might think that that's a nice thing to say to one another, but consider the context. The boy was going off, or the young man was going off to war. He was going off to the trenches. He was going off to the epitome of the human drama, to the epitome of the entanglement of our thoughts. And there in the midst, Thomas Troward said to him, try to see a little more of God every day. Shadrach in the furnace, Daniel in the lion's den, Troward's son at the front, and you and I, every day, have the opportunity to see a little more of God every day. And what you see, you become a little more every day. Let's make our lives our practice for the year 2016. And so it is.